Greetings, greetings, my fellow Romans. Are you guys ready for more Julius Caesar? So, quick. I finally got insane. No, but in all seriousness, though, I found I was going through like my old like costumes I used to wear back when I even used to like dress up, and I found my old Julius Caesar costume. So like I haven't worn this literally in 10 years. But, I figured since, we're covering Rome, I rather as well just always wear this. I don't know how long I'll commit to this, but I'm not gonna lie, guys, I feel kind of cool walking around in this. So, yeah, though I have to wear this satch, because it's, like, stained in the middle for some reason. It's like coffee, I don't know. I don't know where this came from, but either way, yeah, so I'm just gonna try to commit to this, really get into character. And yeah, so now we're at the Battle of Axona. We kind of covered this and the next video after this from Kings and Generals, though I do want to see how, Historia Civilis covers this. So, yeah. So, let's just get to it, I suppose. I don't really have much else to add other than I'm really excited to see more about Julius Caesar. I'm really getting into this series, and yeah, I just want to learn more about Caesar and his exploits, whatever little I can, I suppose. So yeah, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's watch Historia Civilis' The Battle of Axona.
During Julius Caesar's first winter as the governor of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum, he returned to Roman territory to tend to his administrative duties, while his right-hand man, Labienus, wintered with the army in Gaul. During this time, Labienus kept Caesar updated with regular reports. Late in the winter, rumors started to circulate that the people in northeastern Gaul, the Belgae, were considering forming a loose confederation, aligned against the Romans. The Belgae were alarmed by the fact that the Romans were taking such an active role in Gallic affairs. Moreover, the Romans appeared to be making themselves comfortable in Gaul by wintering there in a semi-permanent camp. By the way, the Belgae were right to be alarmed. After receiving these reports from Labienus, Caesar began to raise 2 more legions in Cisalpine Gaul, which brought his total up to 8. This is something worth keeping in mind. When the Senate had assigned Caesar his provinces, they had assigned him 4 legions to go along with them. Now,
yeah, and the thing is about Caesar is just like, he keeps building up these legions, He mentioned in the first few times he built it, he raised it up with his own funds, and his occupation of Gallic territory, as we know, eventually became just subjugating them completely to Rome. So, yeah, you can see Caesar was definitely playing the game of gaining more power, and just, yeah, you can see why the Senate was super afraid of the dude, right? Militarily competent, politically savvy, just like, almost a complete package, so it's a very dangerous man,
Caesar had doubled this number, without getting any approval from the Senate. This wasn't an issue yet, but it would become one later.
Fast-track your career path with short-term training at UEI College in Southern California.
After his 2 legions were up and running, Caesar went north, and met up with Labienus and the rest of his army. He was now in the command of around 35,000 to 40,000 men, after you factor in his earlier losses. When he got there, he sent messages to some friendly tribes neighboring the Belgae, asking them to keep an eye on Belgae activities. They reported back, and each told the same story. The Belgae were mustering a massive army, so Caesar marched north in response. When he entered Belgae territory, the first tribe he encountered, called the Remi, fell all over themselves, swearing that they never intended to join this anti-Roman confederacy. To prove their allegiance, they told Caesar everything they knew. According to the Remi, the Belgae now consisted of 290,000 people. We have no way of verifying this number, but we do know that the Belgae army was quite large, with a lot of infighting between tribes. By the way, here's a handy little tip. These ancient sources have this nasty habit of trying to inflate the size of enemy armies by sneaking women and children into the counts. Here's the trick. Any society with a high mortality rate tends to be around 50% children. Also 50% female, obviously. So you take the given number, divide it by 4, take a little bit off to account for the elderly, and that gives you a very rough estimate as to the maximum number of fighting age males in that society.
We also have Julius Caesar's writings of, I believe, he wrote about his adventures during the Gallic Wars, and, obviously, there is some room for embellishment. People have said, he probably inflated numbers himself to make his own deeds seem cooler, and yeah, it kind of does put into perspective about these ancient sources, right? Like, you could kind of expect that with Caesar, because, when you're writing about yourself, it is tempting to make yourself look a little cooler, and I don't know if Caesar probably did have a bit of an ego, probably, like I said, I don't know the man personally, but I'm willing to guess that he probably had a bit of an ego and would try to make himself look a little cooler than, possible, as much as possible. So yeah, it kind of does put it in perspective, because I have been thinking a lot about where you get history from. Even these YouTube channels, they're not perfect. For instance, Historia Civilis obviously does have a clear bias against Julius Caesar, and it kind of does put, I guess, like I said, into perspective where you're getting your history from and the sources, right? Like, even these ancient sources, you're gonna be like, who's writing them, and what connection do they have to any of this, I don't know, it is interesting, is all I'm saying, when you really think about it.
In this case, we get something like 70,000 men. That's a plausible number, and we have some anecdotal evidence to back it up. So anyway, back to the action. By now the Belgae were on the move. The first target in their sights were the Remi, who were now passing information to the Romans. The Belgae advanced on a town called Bibrex, which was the capital of the Remi. Caesar responded and also moved towards Bibrex. As he approached the town, he came to a bridge across a river that the Romans called the Axona, and we now call the Ain. Before crossing the river, Caesar had his men construct a small fort. He was now entering enemy territory, and he needed to protect this bridge. It was now his only link to friendly territory, and to his food shipments. He left a pretty large garrison there, 6 cohorts, almost 3,000 men. By this time, the Belgae had reached the Remi capital. The Remi sent a message to Caesar, saying that they wouldn't be able to hold out for very long. That night, Caesar had a bunch of skirmishers sneak into the Remi capital, under the cover of darkness. The next day, when the Belgae attempted to approach the gates, they were met with a barrage of Roman missiles, so intense that they were forced to pull back and reevaluate their plans. At this point, they probably realized that there were now Romans fighting alongside the Remi. With this new information, they immediately abandoned their plan to take the Remi capital and marched towards the Roman army. Caesar recalled his skirmishers, but otherwise stayed put. He deployed up on a hill, with the Axona River behind him and a bit of swampy, wet land in front of him. This was a strong defensive position. He put his 6 experienced legions at the front, with his 2 green legions in reserve, just like he had done in the past. The Belgae arrived, and over the next several days, not much happened. There were some cavalry skirmishes, but little else. It was a standoff. The Romans used this time to dig a long trench back from their line in order to prevent a Belgae attack on the flanks. The ditches stretched way back behind the Roman line and ended with small elevated wooden fortifications. On these structures were a bunch of soldiers manning scorpions. If you don't know what a Roman scorpion is, picture a giant crossbow big enough to fire bolts the size of pool cues.
Yeah, basically, I do know that Caesar did utilize scorpions. And you know why I know that? You guys ever seen epic rap battles of history? Yeah, there's the one where it was, Julius Caesar versus, I think the man's name Shaka Zulu, or he's one of the Zulu ruler, and yeah, like I remember watching that many years ago, and there's like a verse mentioning Julius Caesar used like scorpions. So yeah, these are kind of like, I guess, like before we had like guns and cannons. I guess this is like the closest you could get to like, I don't know, like one of those, right? Oh man. But man, you know what I'm really amazed is just how much Caesar utilized engineers. Like, you know, even when we were covering the Alexander the Great series and Napoleon series from Epic History TV, you know, they didn't mention much. Not to say they didn't, mind you, it's just, you know, we didn't go into depth about them using their engineers a lot. But here in like the Julius Caesar series from both from both Kings and Generals and Historia Civilis, Julius Caesar is constantly putting his engineers to work, right? Like building forts, building, you know, bridges, just building, and then, you know, Alesia building walls. He's just like, he's using his engineers, and he must have had the greatest engineers of the world at this point. Like, it is amazing the stuff he managed to pull off. And it kind of gives me a newfound appreciation for engineers and armies. Like, you know, and just how valuable, like, to build siege stuff and whatnot. Like, I never really gave it much thought, but covering Julius Caesar's exploits, it's like, wow, you know, like, you can do a lot, like, accomplish a lot if you have great engineers working under you. And I think Julius Caesar, probably more than anyone, used that to his advantage and just demonstrated a lot of great feats with that. So, I don't know. That's just really cool to think.
Even though the Belgae outnumbered the Romans by a lot, attacking through a swampy area and then uphill was pretty suicidal. Even worse, the Romans were digging in, meaning that the Belgae were losing their advantage by the day. They needed to force Caesar down off that hill. The easiest way to do this would be to cut off his food supply, and the easiest way to do that would be to take control of that bridge. But as we know, Caesar had already thought of this, which is why he left almost 3,000 men to defend it in the first place. The Belgae formed a group of as many as 10,000 men to go and take the bridge. Their plan was this: ford the river, swing around, and attack the Romans defending the bridge before anybody realized what was happening. Then, if Caesar wanted to be stupid enough to try and retake the bridge with 10,000 Belgae on one side and 60,000 on the other, that was up to him. If not, he would be cut off, and they would just starve him out. Assembling 10,000 men and having them cross a river is no small thing, and Caesar could see it all happening clear as day from his hilltop perch. Caesar obviously didn't want to abandon the hilltop, since forcing Caesar down off the hilltop was the entire point of the exercise. So he left all of his infantry in place, but gathered together all of his cavalry and all of his skirmishers. Caesar then personally led them down off the hill, across the bridge, and to the Belgae crossing. He moved with exceptional speed, and when he got there, only a small number of Belgae had actually completed the crossing. He charged this group with his cavalry, killing most and driving the rest off. Then, when his skirmishers caught up, they opened up on the Belgae still crossing the river, throwing javelins and slinging stones. The Belgae mid-crossing couldn't handle this heat. Some made it to the other side, at which time they were simply cut down by the cavalry waiting for them. Many were killed in the middle of the river, and the rest turned back. The Belgae plan failed miserably, and now they were in a weaker position than ever. There was a big meeting between the Belgae tribes. There was no one leader in command, and there was a lot of infighting. They had not come prepared to conduct a siege, or to spend several months playing cat and mouse with Caesar. Most of the tribes were unhappy. A vote was held, and they decided that they should each go home and resupply.
Oh dear.
They all agreed to mobilize again if the Romans ever went on the offensive. That night, the Belgae army simply walked off. Caesar had a hard time believing that this wasn't a trap, so he sent Labienus out with 3 legions and all of the cavalry to investigate. While they were gone, Caesar continued to hold their hilltop position, just in case. Labienus stumbled upon some of the Belgae and attacked. To his surprise, it wasn't a trap, and they didn't put up much of a fight. Labienus returned to Caesar and told him that it was exactly what it looked like. The Belgae had gone home. Let's not forget that the entire reason Caesar had come to Belgae territory in the first place was to force the Belgae to stand down. They had. Mission accomplished. Caesar could have taken this opportunity to return south, but he didn't. His campaign against the Belgae would only continue. If you're eager to know what he did next, you're in luck, because I already made that video, right here.
Yep. And we will cover that next time. So yeah, overall, you know, yeah, kind of, like I said, I didn't add much because we kind of covered it already, but yeah, overall, just another great, solid video, and I can't wait to see the next one, which I'll be jumping to as of right now. So, I'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.